Admiral HFY pressed his six-fingered hand against the cold metal wall of his command ship. Through the large window, he could see the wreckage of another Council vessel floating in space. The ship had been torn apart by Vorthan plasma cannons. Just minutes ago, 30,000 lives lost in a single blast. He had watched this scene too many times over the past 7 years. The war with the Vorthan Empire had become a nightmare that never ended. Every day brought new battles, new losses, and no real progress for either side. The Altarian admiral turned away from the window and walked back to his command chair. His blue skin showed the stress lines that had deepened over the years of constant warfare. Around him, his bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Everyone knew the routine by now: fight, retreat, repair, and fight again. "Status report," HFY said to his tactical officer. 17 Council ships destroyed today, sir. We managed to take out 12 Vorthan vessels. The enemy fleet is pulling back to their staging area near the Kepler mining stations. The same numbers, the same results. Neither side could gain a real advantage. The Vorthans had better shields and more powerful weapons. The Council had more ships and better defensive positions. The result was a war that just went on, eating up lives and resources with no end in sight. HFY had been fighting this war since it started. What began as a simple disagreement over mining rights in the Kepler sector had grown into something much bigger. The Vorthan Empire wanted to expand their territory. The Galactic Council wanted to stop them. Now, 7 years later, entire star systems had been destroyed and billions of people had died. The Admiral remembered when the war first started. Everyone thought it would be over quickly. The Council had more member species and more ships. The Vorthans were known for being aggressive, but they were just one empire against many. How hard could it be to stop them? They had learned the hard way that the Vorthans were not easy to defeat. Their technology was different from Council technology. While Council ships focused on defense and protection, Vorthan ships were built to destroy. Their plasma cannons could punch through any shield the Council had. Their ships were faster and more maneuverable, but the Council had numbers. For every Vorthan ship destroyed, they could build 3 more Council vessels. The problem was that Vorthan ships could destroy 3 Council ships before going down. The math never worked in the Council's favor. The war had settled into a pattern. The Vorthans would attack a Council position. Council forces would defend and call for reinforcements. Both sides would fight until their losses became too great. Then they would retreat and repair their fleets. A few weeks later, they would do it all again. HFY's communication officer looked up from his station. "Sir, we have an incoming transmission from Centauri Prime. It's marked urgent." "Put it through." The holographic image of Council diplomat Yarthel appeared in the center of the bridge. The tall, thin alien looked tired. Everyone in the Council looked tired these days. "Admiral HFY, I hope your latest engagement went better than our intelligence suggested." "It went exactly as our intelligence suggested, diplomat. We trade ships with the Vorthans and accomplish nothing." "What can I do for you?" Yarthel's expression changed. He looked confused and maybe a little excited. "I've received something unusual. A transmission from an unexplored sector of the galaxy. A species that calls themselves humans claims they have been watching our war. They want to help." HFY felt his heart sink. Another species wanting to get involved in the war usually meant more complications, not solutions. "What do they offer? More ships? Better weapons?" "That's the strange part. They don't mention ships or weapons at all. They just say they have experience with warfare and think they can help us end this conflict." The Admiral looked at the tactical display showing Vorthan positions. "Any species with faster-than-light travel and military experience could be useful. What's their technology level?" Yarthel paused. "That's the problem. They don't seem to have faster-than-light travel. Their transmission came through primitive radio waves. It took months to reach us." HFY stared at the diplomat's image. "You're telling me that a species without interstellar travel wants to help us fight the Vorthan Empire? Are they insane?" "I don't know, Admiral, but they seem to know a lot about our war." They mentioned specific battles, tactical situations, and even some of our classified ship designs. Somehow, they've been watching us for years. This was getting stranger by the minute. How could a primitive species monitor a galactic war? And why would they want to get involved in something that could destroy their entire world if they made the wrong choice? What does the High Chancellor think about this? Zexai asked. Chancellor Moldar is reviewing the situation. Most of the council thinks it's a waste of time. How could a species that hasn't even left their own star system help us fight the most advanced military empire in the galaxy? Zexai had to admit the council had a point. The war had been going on for 7 years because both sides had reached the limits of current military technology and tactics. If the greatest minds in the galaxy couldn't find a solution, how could some primitive aliens help? But something about the situation interested him. Any species that could monitor galactic communications from such a distance had to have some advanced technology. Maybe they had developed in different directions than the rest of the galaxy. Have they provided any proof of their capabilities? He asked. They sent detailed analyses of several recent battles, including tactical mistakes made by both sides. Their observations were accurate, uncomfortably accurate. That was interesting. Most species in the galaxy had similar approaches to warfare. They followed established patterns of engagement, used similar tactics, and made predictable strategic decisions. If these humans could spot mistakes that experienced military leaders missed, maybe they had a different perspective on combat. What are they asking for in return for their help? Nothing. They say they just want the war to end. They claim that the destruction is affecting interstellar stability and could eventually threaten their own world. Zexai thought about this. The war had indeed destabilized several trade routes and caused refugee crises across multiple sectors. Maybe these humans were worried about the long-term effects on their region of space. His tactical officer looked up from his station. Admiral, we're receiving reports from the Third Fleet, another major engagement near the Vega system. Early reports suggest heavy losses on both sides. Another day, another battle, another list of ships and lives lost. Zexai was tired of it. All 7 years of war with no progress. If there was even a small chance that these mysterious humans could help, maybe it was worth investigating. Diplomat Yarthel, what would it take to make contact with these humans? They've offered to send a representative to meet with us. Apparently, they do have some kind of interstellar capability, even if it's not faster than light travel. They could reach our space, but it would take them several months. Several months. In that time, thousands more ships would be destroyed and millions more lives would be lost. But if there was any chance of ending this war, Zexai thought it might be worth the wait. Recommend to the High Chancellor that we accept their offer? We have nothing to lose at this point, Yarthel nodded. I'll pass along your recommendation. Though I have to warn you, Admiral, most of the Council thinks this is a desperate move by a species that doesn't understand the situation. As the transmission ended, Zexai looked back out at the wreckage floating in space. Maybe the Council was right. Maybe this was just desperation. But after 7 years of deadlock, desperation might be exactly what they needed. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the EDF Defiance and watched the stars through the main viewing screen. After 6 months of travel, they were finally approaching Council space. The ship hummed quietly around him as the crew prepared for humanity's first official contact with an alien civilization. The Defiance was not like the ships the aliens were used to seeing. It had been built in secret over 15 years using technology that humans had reverse-engineered from a crashed alien probe. The probe had been found in the Nevada desert in 2089, and ever since then, Earth's best scientists had been working to understand how it worked. Jake had been chosen to lead this mission because of his experience with difficult situations. He had served in the Mars colonial wars and the Jupiter mining conflicts. He understood how to deal with enemies who had better technology and more resources. But this was different. This time, humanity was trying to help instead of fight. Lieutenant Amy Carter looked up from her tactical station. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Council station. Harmony Point. They're asking us to identify ourselves and state our business. Tell them we're the human delegation they've been expecting. Request permission to dock. Amy worked at her console for a few moments, then looked back at Jake. They're granting us docking permission, but they want to speak with our commanding officer immediately upon arrival. Jake nodded. He had expected this. The aliens were probably curious about what humans looked like and how they behaved. According to the intelligence they had gathered over the years, most alien species in the galaxy were similar to each other in how they thought and acted. Humans might be something completely new to them. The Defiant slowly approached the massive council station. Harmony Point was bigger than any structure humans had ever built. It stretched for kilometers in all directions and housed millions of alien beings from dozens of different species. Jake could see hundreds of alien ships docked at various ports around the station. Amy, what can you tell me about the ships we're seeing? Amy studied her sensors. Most of them follow similar design patterns, Captain. Heavy armor, defensive weapon systems, and what appear to be standard communication arrays. They all look like they're built for long campaigns rather than quick strikes. That was interesting. During their years of monitoring alien communications, humans had learned that galactic warfare was very different from human warfare. The aliens seemed to follow rules and patterns that humans had abandoned thousands of years ago. The Defiance docked smoothly with the station. Jake and his team prepared to meet the aliens face-to-face for the first time. His team included Commander Lisa Grant, Earth's chief military strategist, and Dr. Sam Wilson, a specialist in alien languages and cultures. The airlock opened, and Jake got his first look at real aliens. Admiral Zexai was tall and blue with 6 arms and large eyes. Diplomat Yarthel was thin and green with a long neck. There were several other aliens behind them, all different species, but all watching the humans with obvious curiosity. "Welcome to Harmony Point," Admiral Zexai said in surprisingly good English. "I am Admiral Zexai of the Altarian Fleet. This is Diplomat Yarthel. We are very interested to meet the humans who claim they can help us end our war." Jake stepped forward and extended his hand. The Admiral looked confused for a moment, then carefully took Jake's hand with one of his 6 hands. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. This is Commander Lisa Grant and Dr. Sam Wilson. We appreciate the opportunity to meet with you." The group moved to a conference room inside the station. Jake noticed that the aliens walked in formation and maintained formal postures even during casual conversation. Everything about them suggested military discipline and established protocols. "Before we begin," Admiral Zexai said, "I must ask how your species managed to monitor our communications from such a great distance. Our intelligence suggests you do not have faster than light." "Travel," Dr. Wilson answered this question. "We developed very sensitive listening equipment over many years. Your communications travel through space at the speed of light. We simply learned to detect and decode them. It took time, but we were patient." Diplomat Yarthel leaned forward. "How long have you been watching our war?" "Since it began 7 years ago," Lisa said. "We have detailed records of major battles, troop movements, and tactical decisions made by both sides." The aliens looked at each other. Jake could tell they were surprised that a primitive species had been observing them for so long without their knowledge. "What is your assessment of our situation?" Admiral Zexai asked. Lisa activated a portable display device and showed tactical diagrams of recent battles. "You're fighting a war of attrition with an enemy that has superior individual ship capabilities. Your advantage is in numbers, but you're using those numbers in predictable ways. The Vorthans have learned to counter your standard tactics." The Admiral studied the diagrams. "These tactics have been proven effective over centuries of galactic warfare. They are based on sound military principles. Sound for fighting other council species," Lisa replied. "But the Vorthans don't follow the same rules you do. They're willing to use tactics that you consider dishonorable or excessive." Jake watched the aliens' reactions. They seemed confused by Lisa's observations. In their culture, apparently, there were right ways and wrong ways to fight wars. The idea that an enemy might ignore those rules seemed to bother them. What do you mean by dishonorable tactics? Yarthel asked. Lisa brought up recordings of Vorthan. Attacks. They target command ships first to disrupt your chain of command. They use false retreat maneuvers to draw your ships into traps. They attack supply lines instead of engaging your main battle fleets. These are all effective tactics, but you don't respond to them properly because you consider them unfair. Admiral Zexhias' expression showed his discomfort. Those tactics show no respect for the established conventions of warfare. They cause unnecessary suffering and violate agreements that have existed for thousands of years. But they work, Lisa said simply. And that's why you're losing. The room became very quiet. Jake could see that Lisa's words had shocked the aliens. They had never considered that their adherence to military traditions might be a weakness rather than a strength. Dr. Wilson spoke up. May I ask about your rules of warfare? What agreements do you follow? Diplomat Yarthel explained the galactic conventions. Civilian targets were protected. Certain weapons were banned as too destructive. Ships that surrendered were not to be attacked. Supply lines were considered legitimate targets, but attacks on them were supposed to be announced in advance. Jake listened with growing amazement. The aliens had turned warfare into a gentleman's game with rules that both sides followed. It was like watching a chess match instead of a real fight for survival. These rules, Jake said carefully, do both sides follow them? The Council always follows them, Admiral Zexhi said proudly. The Vorthans follow most of them, though they sometimes bend the interpretations. Lisa looked at Jake, and he could see she was thinking the same thing he was. These aliens had no idea what real war looked like. They had been playing by rules for so long that they had forgotten the basic truth of conflict. The side that wants to win more will usually win. Admiral, Lisa said, would you be willing to let us observe one of your upcoming battles? We'd like to see how both sides actually fight before we make any recommendations. The Admiral considered this. We are planning a major offensive against Vorthan positions in the Rigel system next week. You may observe from a safe distance. Jake nodded. We'd appreciate that opportunity. But I should warn you, our perspective on warfare might be very different from yours. We come from a world where survival has always been more important than honor. The aliens looked at each other again. Jake could tell they didn't fully understand what he meant, but they would learn soon enough. As the meeting ended and the humans returned to their ship, Amy asked Jake what he thought of the aliens. They're good people, Jake said. But they've forgotten that sometimes good people have to do terrible things to survive. The Vorthans understand that. The Council doesn't. That's why this war has gone on for 7 years. Lisa was already working on tactical assessments. Captain, I think we can help them. But they're not going to like our methods. Jake looked out at the alien ships docked around the station. Soon, he thought, these beings would learn what humans meant when they talked about war. Colonel Ryan Parker walked through the corridors of the Council's forward command base on Proxima Station. The base was huge and well organized, but something about it bothered him. Everything was too clean? Too orderly? It looked more like a university than a military headquarters in the middle of a war. Ryan had arrived 3 days ago with a team of 12 human military advisors. They had come to study how the Council fought their war and to figure out why they couldn't beat the Vorthans. What he had found surprised him. The aliens were smart, disciplined, and well-equipped. Their technology was impressive and their soldiers were brave. But they fought like they were following a textbook instead of trying to survive. Every decision went through committees. Every attack was planned months in advance. Every battle followed the same basic pattern. Captain Helen Brooks walked up beside him. She was a specialist in psychological operations, and she looked as confused as Ryan felt. Colonel, I've been studying their battle records for 3 days. I can't figure out how this war has lasted 7 years. What do you mean? Look at this, Helen said, showing him a tablet with battle data. The Vorthans have the same staging area for their fleet every time they attack the Kepler mining stations. Same approach route, same formation, same timing. The Council knows exactly when and how they're coming, but they still can't stop them. Ryan looked at the data. Helen was right. The Vorthan attack pattern was so predictable that any human military commander could have set up a perfect ambush, but the Council kept meeting them head-on in fair fights that they usually lost. Have you asked them why they don't ambush the Vorthans? I tried. Admiral Zexhai said that ambush tactics are considered dishonorable. Apparently, both sides are supposed to meet in open battle so the stronger force can win fairly. Ryan stopped walking. They think war is supposed to be fair? That's what it looks like. They have all these rules about how battles should be fought. No surprise attacks, no targeting of supply ships without warning, no psychological warfare. It's like they're playing a game instead of fighting for their lives. This explained a lot of what Ryan had observed over the past few days. The Council treated the war like a sporting event with rules that both teams followed. The problem was that the Vorthans were better at playing by those rules. They reached the main briefing room where Admiral Zexhai was waiting with his staff. The Admiral had asked for a meeting to discuss human observations about the war. Ryan hoped he could explain the situation without insulting their hosts. Colonel Parker, Admiral Zexhai said, your team has had time to study our operations. What are your conclusions? Ryan looked around the room at the alien officers. They all seemed eager to hear what the humans had learned. He decided to be direct. Admiral, you're not fighting a war. You're participating in a contest. The room became very quiet. Several alien officers looked offended by Ryan's words. I don't understand, the Admiral said. Captain Helen Brooks stepped forward. What the Colonel means is that you've developed rules and traditions that limit how you can fight. These rules make the war more civilized, but they also prevent you from winning. Lieutenant Ben Davis, Ryan's intelligence officer, activated a holographic display showing Vorthan fleet movements. For example, your enemy uses the same supply route to support their operations in the Kepler sector. A simple attack on their supply convoy would end their ability to fight in that region. But you don't attack it because you consider it unfair. Admiral Zexhai looked confused. Supply convoys are civilian vessels. Attacking them would violate the Galactic Convention on warfare. But they're carrying weapons and ammunition to enemy forces, Ben replied. On Earth, we would consider that a legitimate military target? The aliens looked at each other with uncomfortable expressions. Ryan could see that the humans were challenging ideas that the aliens had never questioned. Colonel Parker, Yarthel said, are you suggesting that we abandon the conventions that have governed civilized warfare for thousands of years? Ryan thought carefully about his answer. He didn't want to make the aliens think that humans were barbaric, but he needed them to understand the reality of their situation. Diplomat, let me ask you a question. If the Vorthans were threatening to destroy your homeworld and kill everyone you cared about, would you still follow those conventions? Of course not. We would do whatever was necessary to protect our people. Then why aren't you doing that now? This war has killed billions of people and destroyed entire star systems. How is that different from a threat to your homeworld? The room was silent for a long moment. Ryan could see that his question had made the aliens think about their situation in a new way. Helen brought up another display showing casualty reports. In 7 years of fighting, you've lost over 2 million ships and more than 50 billion lives. The Vorthans have lost similar numbers, but neither side has gained any real advantage because you're both following the same playbook. Admiral Zexhai studied the casualty numbers. What would you suggest we do differently? Ben stepped forward with a detailed tactical analysis. We've identified 17 critical weaknesses in the Vorthan war effort. Most of them exist because they assume you'll continue following traditional tactics. The display showed a map of Vorthan space with various installations marked in red. Their entire war machine depends on a single massive supply and logistics center called the Iron Nexus. It's located deep in their territory, protected by automated defenses and surrounded by their main fleet. We know about the Iron Nexus, Admiral Zexhai said. It's impossible to attack. The defenses are too strong and it's too far from our territory. It's impossible to attack using traditional methods, Ryan agreed, but there are other ways to approach the problem. Helen activated another display showing Vorthan communication networks. We've been monitoring their military communications for the past week. Their command structure is highly centralized and dependent on automated systems. They trust their computers more than their officers. What does that mean? Yarthel asked. It means they have weaknesses that you've never thought to exploit, Ben said. Their communications can be disrupted. Their automated systems can be turned against them. Their rigid command structure can be confused and misdirected. Admiral Zexhai looked skeptical. Even if such tactics were possible, they would be highly dishonorable. No civilized species would use deception and trickery in warfare. Ryan felt frustrated. These aliens were so focused on fighting honorably that they couldn't see how to fight effectively. He decided to try a different approach. Admiral, let me tell you about human history. My species has been fighting wars for thousands of years. We fought over territory, resources, beliefs, and survival. We learned long ago that the side that wants to win more will usually win, regardless of honor or fairness. He activated a display showing Earth's geography. On our world, we have a saying, all's fair in love and war. It means that when survival is at stake, there are no rules except victory. The aliens looked disturbed by this concept. Ryan could see that they had never considered warfare as a matter of pure survival. Helen continued the explanation. The reason your war has lasted 7 years is that both sides are trying to win while following the same rules. It's like playing chess where both players know all of each other's strategies. The game can go on forever. But if one side changes the rules, Ben added, if one side is willing to do things the other side won't do, then the balance shifts completely. Admiral Zexhai was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. Are you saying that to defeat the Vorthans? We must become like them? No, Ryan said. We're saying you need to become something they've never faced before. You need to fight like your species' survival depends on it, because it does. The meeting ended with the aliens agreeing to consider human suggestions. But Ryan could tell they were still uncomfortable with the idea of abandoning their traditional approach to warfare as the humans returned to their quarters. Helen asked Ryan what he thought would happen. They'll resist at first, Ryan said. But eventually they'll realize that losing honorably is still losing. When they're ready to do whatever it takes to win, we'll show them how. Captain Jake Morrison checked his watch as he stood on the bridge of the Defiance. It was 0800 Galactic Standard Time. In exactly 30 minutes, the human plan would begin. After 3 weeks of preparation, they were finally ready to show the galaxy what human warfare looked like. The plan was simple in concept but complex in execution. Instead of fighting the Vorthan Empire ship to ship like the Council had been doing for 7 years, the humans would attack the foundation of the Vorthan war effort. They would destroy the enemy's ability to fight rather than just fighting the enemy. Jake looked at his tactical display showing the positions of 12 human ships. Each ship had been disguised to look like a Council cargo vessel. The Vorthans were used to seeing such ships moving through their territory, carrying supplies to Council forces. They had learned to ignore them as long as they followed proper shipping routes and responded to security checks. Status report, Jake said to his bridge crew. Lieutenant Amy Carter looked up from her station. All ships are in position, Captain. Team Alpha is approaching Checkpoint 7. Team Beta is near Checkpoint 12. Team Gamma is holding position at the outer marker. Each team consisted of 4 ships carrying human Special Forces soldiers and computer specialists. Their job was to get close to the Iron Nexus without being detected. The Vorthans expected Council forces to announce their attacks and approach from predictable directions. They would never expect enemy forces to sneak through their territory. Disguised as civilian traffic. Major Kate Sullivan's voice came through the communication system from her position aboard the disguised freighter Liberty. Control, this is Infiltration Team. We have successfully penetrated Vorthan communication networks. Standing by to begin Phase 2. Kate and her team of computer specialists had spent weeks learning how Vorthan military systems worked. Unlike human systems, which were designed to work even when damaged, Vorthan systems were built for efficiency and automation. They worked perfectly under normal conditions but could be easily confused if someone fed them the wrong information. Roger, infiltration team, begin phase 2 on my mark. Jake replied. At exactly 0830, Kate's team began their electronic attack. On Vorthan communications, they didn't try to shut down the systems, which would have been detected immediately. Instead, they began sending false orders through the Vorthan command network. The orders were carefully crafted to sound authentic. They instructed various Vorthan fleet units to change positions for routine maintenance, security patrols, and supply runs. Each order was small and reasonable by itself, but together they slowly moved key defensive fleets away from the Iron Nexus. Captain Lisa Grant monitored the results from her command ship. Jake, it's working. Vorthan fleet movements are matching our projections. They're redistributing their forces exactly as we predicted. The Vorthans trusted their automated systems so completely that they didn't question orders that came through proper channels. Their officers assumed that someone higher up the chain of command had authorized the movements. The result was that their defensive fleet was scattering across their territory, leaving the Iron Nexus more vulnerable than it had been in years. At 0900, Jake gave the order for Phase 3. All teams begin approach to primary target. Maintain communications silence from this point forward. The 12 human ships began their final approach to the Iron Nexus. They moved slowly and followed normal traffic patterns to avoid detection. To any Vorthan observer, they looked like routine supply convoys heading to various destinations throughout the sector. Major Don Collins led the demolition team aboard the cargo ship Freedom. His job was to get inside the Iron Nexus and plant explosives at critical structural points. The station was massive, bigger than most cities, and its destruction would cripple the Vorthan war effort. Collins to Morrison, Dan's voice came through the secured channel. We have visual on the target. The station is as big as our intelligence suggested. This is going to be quite a fireworks show. Jake smiled grimly. Don had a reputation for understatement. If he said it would be a fireworks show, the explosion would probably be visible from several star systems away. At 1000 hours, the real attack began. The human ships dropped their disguises and revealed their true configurations. Instead of slow cargo vessels, they were fast attack ships loaded with weapons and marines. But they didn't attack the Iron Nexus directly. Instead, they began a coordinated assault on Vorthan command and control systems throughout the sector. The aliens watching from their observation post couldn't believe what they were seeing. Admiral Zexhai stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the tactical display in amazement. How are they doing this? He asked Colonel Ryan Parker, who was observing the battle from the Council command ship. They're not fighting your enemy, Ryan replied. They're fighting your enemy's ability to fight. Look at what they're targeting. The display showed human ships attacking communication relays, sensor networks, and command centers. They weren't trying to destroy Vorthan warships. They were trying to make those warships unable to coordinate with each other. Captain Helen Brooks pointed to another part of the display. See how they're using the Vorthan's own automated systems against them. Every false order they sent earlier is now creating confusion in the Vorthan response. The Vorthan fleet was trying to respond to the human attack, but their ships couldn't communicate with each other properly. Their automated systems were giving conflicting orders. Their commanders were receiving reports that didn't match what they could see with their own sensors. At 1100 hours, the confusion reached its peak. Vorthan ships were firing on each other because their identification systems had been scrambled. Fleet formations were breaking apart as individual ships tried to follow contradictory orders. The mighty Vorthan war machine was tearing itself apart. Jake watched the chaos on his tactical display with satisfaction. Amy, how long until Collins reaches his target? Demolition team is inside the station now, Captain. They should be in position within the hour. The Iron Nexus was so large that it took Major Collins and his team nearly an hour to reach the critical structural points. The station had been built to supply the entire Vorthan war effort, and its destruction would leave their fleets without ammunition, fuel, or spare parts. At 1200 hours, Collins reported that his charges were in place. Morrison, this is Collins. Explosives are set and ready. We're moving to extraction point now. Jake looked around his bridge. The battle had been going on for 4 hours, and the Vorthans still hadn't figured out what was happening to them. Their fleets were scattered, their communications were down, and their main supply base was about to be destroyed. All ships, prepare for final phase. Collins, you have authorization to proceed. The explosion that followed was indeed visible from several star systems away. The Iron Nexus, a structure that had taken decades to build, disappeared in a ball of fire that briefly outshone the local star. With it went the Vorthan Empire's ability to supply their war effort. Vorthan High Command finally understood what had happened to them. Their fleet was scattered and leaderless. Their communications were compromised. Their supply lines were severed. They had no choice but to surrender. At exactly 1300 hours, 5 hours after the human attack began, the Vorthan Empire sent an unconditional surrender to the Galactic Council. The war that had lasted 7 years was over. Admiral HFY stood in stunned silence as he watched Vorthan ships throughout the sector shutting down their weapons and surrendering to the nearest Council forces. The humans had achieved in 5 hours what the Council couldn't accomplish in 7 years of fighting. Jake Morrison sat back in his command chair and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The mission was complete, and humanity had proven that sometimes the best way to win a war was not to fight it the way your enemy expected. Captain, Amy said, we're receiving surrender signals from Vorthan forces throughout the sector. The war is over, Jake nodded. Send a message to Admiral HFY. Tell him that humanity is ready to discuss terms for a permanent peace in the galaxy. As the human ships began to withdraw from the battle zone, Jake thought about what they had accomplished. They had shown the galaxy that there was more than one way to fight a war. Now it was time to show them how to build a lasting peace. Admiral HFY stood in the main conference room of Harmony Point, looking out at the assembled representatives from across the galaxy. 3 days had passed since the end of the war, and everyone was still trying to understand what had happened. The room was filled with diplomats, military leaders, and observers from dozens of different species. At the center of the room sat the human delegation. Captain Jake Morrison, Colonel Ryan Parker, Commander Lisa Grant, and the other humans looked calm and relaxed, as if ending a 7-year galactic war in 5 hours was something they did every day. High Chancellor Moldar called the session to order. The tall, gray-skinned leader of the Galactic Council had been in charge during the worst years of the war. Now, he was trying to make sense of the peace that had come so suddenly. We are here today to understand what happened during the recent military action that ended our conflict with the Vorthan Empire, Chancellor Moldar said. Captain Morrison, would you please explain your tactics to the assembled representatives? Jake stood up and activated a holographic display showing the battle timeline. The operation was based on a simple principle. Instead of fighting the enemy's strength, we attacked their weaknesses. Instead of destroying their ships, we destroyed their ability to use those ships effectively. The display showed how the humans had infiltrated Vorthan communications, scattered their fleet, and eliminated their supply base. To the assembled aliens, it looked like magic. They had never seen warfare conducted this way. Representative Kethver from the Regelian Consortium raised his hand. Captain Morrison, your tactics seem to rely heavily on deception and misdirection. How do you justify using such dishonorable methods? Jake looked at the alien representative with a serious expression. Representative Kethver, let me ask you a question. How many people died during the 7 years this war lasted? Approximately 50 billion sentient beings lost their lives. And how many people died during our 5-hour operation? Kethver checked his datapad. Fewer than 10,000, mostly from the destruction of the Iron Nexus. Then which approach was more honorable? Fighting fairly while 50 billion people died, or fighting effectively and saving the lives of everyone who would have died if? The war continued? The room was quiet as the aliens considered Jake's words. Many of them had never thought about honor in terms of results rather than methods. Admiral HFY spoke up. Captain Morrison, your tactics were undoubtedly effective, but they challenge everything we understand about civilized warfare. How? Can we be sure that these methods won't lead to even more destructive conflicts in the future? Colonel Ryan Parker stood to answer this question. Admiral, the galaxy has been fortunate that all of your species developed similar approaches to warfare. You all follow the same basic rules and fight in predictable ways. But that also made your conflicts last longer and cost more lives than necessary. Ryan activated another display showing casualty statistics from various galactic conflicts over the past 1,000 years. Look at these numbers. Every major war in galactic history has lasted for years and resulted in massive casualties. Not because the conflicts were more complex, but because both sides always fought using the same methods. Commander Lisa Grant added her perspective. What we've shown you is that conflicts can be ended quickly and decisively if one side is willing to think differently. The key is to make war so costly and unpredictable that nobody wants to start one in the first place. A new voice spoke from the back of the room. General Thrakinen of the former Vorthan military had been allowed to attend the conference as part of the surrender negotiations. The large, heavily armored alien looked defeated but curious. Humans, General Thrakinen said, I have studied your attack for 3 days. I still do not understand how you infiltrated our most secure systems. Our computer networks were supposed to be impenetrable. Major Kate Sullivan, who had led the electronic warfare team, smiled. General, your systems were designed to be perfect. They worked exactly as intended under normal circumstances. But they had no flexibility when faced with unexpected situations. She activated a technical display showing Vorthan computer architecture. Your networks trusted any order that came, through proper channels with the correct authorization codes. You never considered that someone might steal those codes and use them to send false orders. But how did you obtain our authorization codes? We listened to your communications for years, Kate replied. We recorded millions of messages and used pattern analysis to figure out how your command structure worked. Once we understood the system, it was easy to create authentic-looking false orders. General Thrakinen shook his head. Such tactics would never occur to us. We assumed that our enemies would attack us directly, not try to turn our own systems against us. Captain Jake Morrison stood again, and that's exactly why the war lasted 7 years. Both sides made assumptions about how the other side would behave. You fought predictably because you assumed your enemies would also fight predictably. Chancellor Moldar leaned forward in his chair. Captain Morrison, what you're describing sounds like it could make warfare much more dangerous. If everyone abandons the established conventions, conflicts could become far more destructive. Jake nodded. That's possible, Chancellor. But it's also possible that conflicts will become much rarer. When potential aggressors know that their enemies might use any tactic to defend themselves, they're less likely to start wars in the first place. Diplomat Yarthel asked, Are you suggesting that the galaxy should abandon all rules of warfare? Not exactly, Colonel Parker replied. We're suggesting that you need to be prepared for enemies who don't follow your rules. The Vorthans were already bending your conventions. Eventually, someone would have broken them completely. Lisa Grant brought up historical data on human conflicts. On our world, we learned long ago that the side that wants to win more will usually find a way to win. The question is whether you want to be prepared for that reality or be surprised by it. Admiral HFY looked thoughtful. What you're saying is that our approach to warfare has made us vulnerable to anyone willing to fight differently. Exactly, Jake confirmed. Your traditions and honor codes are admirable, but they also make you predictable. An enemy who doesn't share those values has a significant advantage. The discussion continued for several hours as the aliens tried to understand the implications of what the humans had shown them. Finally, Chancellor Moldar asked the question that everyone was thinking. Captain Morrison, what does humanity want from the galaxy? You've proven that your species has military capabilities that far exceed our own. What are your intentions? Jake looked around the room at all the assembled aliens. Chancellor, we want the same thing you want. Peace, stability, and the chance for all species to grow and prosper. We didn't end this war to conquer anyone. We ended it because the fighting was threatening the stability of our region of space. But surely you must want something in return for your help. We want to be left alone to develop our civilization in peace, Jake replied. We also want to make sure that conflicts like this one don't happen again. Large-scale wars are bad for everyone, even species that aren't directly involved. Chancellor Moldar considered this. Would humanity be willing to join the Galactic Council? Your perspective on military matters could be valuable in maintaining peace. Jake looked at his team, then back at the Chancellor. We'd be honored to join the Council on one condition. We want it understood that if any species threatens the peace of the galaxy, humanity will respond with whatever methods we consider necessary. We won't be bound by conventions that prevent us from protecting innocent lives. The room was silent as the aliens absorbed this statement. They realized that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The age of predictable, honorable warfare was over. Humanity had introduced a new reality where survival and effectiveness mattered more than tradition and honor. General Thrakenin spoke one final time. Humans, you have taught us that war is not a game with rules. It is a struggle for survival where the only law is victory. This is a hard lesson, but perhaps a necessary one. Jake nodded. General, we hope that this lesson will make future wars less likely. When everyone understands that conflict can end quickly and decisively, perhaps they'll work harder to solve their problems peacefully. As the conference ended and the various species prepared to return to their homeworlds, word spread throughout the galaxy about what had happened. The small blue world called Earth had produced a species that could end galactic wars in hours instead of years. From that day forward, the mention of humanity would make even the most powerful empires think twice before starting conflicts. The galaxy had learned that somewhere in the darkness between the stars, there was a species that understood war not as a political tool or a test of honor, but as a fight for survival where anything was possible. The war that had consumed the galaxy for 7 years was over. But everyone understood that a new era had begun, one where peace would be maintained not by honor and tradition, but by the knowledge that someone was watching who was willing to do whatever it took to preserve the stability of the stars.